November 1941, as the world teetered on the brink of global war, the remote, storm-swept Aleutian Islands remained largely an afterthought. Yet, for Imperial Japan, this desolate chain stretching 1,000 miles across the North Pacific held profound strategic importance. June 1942. Japanese forces landed on the uninhabited islands of Kiska and Attu. Their objectives were clear: to disrupt any potential American offensive via the Aleutians, to establish a strategic barrier between the United States and Russia, and to construct advance air bases for future operations. Attu, 600 miles from Siberia and 650 miles from Japan's Paramushiro naval base, was the lonesomest spot this side of hell. Its previous inhabitants, 45 native Aleutians and 2 Americans, schoolteacher Foster Jones and his wife, had been removed by the invaders. Initially, the 301st Independent Infantry Battalion landed at Chichagof Harbor, but the primary Japanese base was swiftly established at the more defensible Holtz Bay. By October 29, 1942, a reinforced Japanese mixed force had re-established and fortified Holtz Bay, installing beach defenses and vital dual-purpose antidues in 2,500 infantry. The Attu garrison steadily grew from approximately 500 to an estimated 2,300 well-entrenched men by March 10, 1943. For the United States, Attu's early strategic importance had been underestimated. Its vulnerability led to its swift occupation, but the U.S. High Command eventually recognized the threat. A pivotal strategic shift occurred in late March 1943. Attu, not the more heavily fortified Kiska, would be the first target. The aim was to make Kiska untenable by seizing its sister island. This decision would be validated by the battle's outcome. May 11, 1943. The American invasion force, comprising the 7th Infantry Division including the 17th and 32nd Infantry Regiments, 2 battalions of 105 mm Field Artillery, and the 50th Engineers initiated landings. 4 separate amphibious assaults were planned, 2 main landings at Massacre Bay for the Southern Force and Red Beach for the Northern Force, complemented by subsidiary landings at Austin Cove and Alexei Point. At 16:20 hours, the Southern Force landed at Massacre Bay. The terrain was unforgiving, shale and small rocks at the bay's edge, giving way to treacherous tundra. Almost immediately, the unforgiving environment began to exert its dominance. American equipment designed for less extreme climes proved deficient. Clothing was insufficient for the biting winds and icy rain. All leather, high-laced blucher boots, unsuitable for prolonged immersion in freezing water, led to debilitating trench foot. Crucially, many troops were not initially issued the essential rubber-bottomed, leather-topped shoe packs. Technological advantages such as mechanized equipment were severely hampered. Treads of tractors broke through the spongy tundra, sinking into thick black mud, rendering their advance impossible. This was not a battle where technology alone would prevail. It would be a high-cost infantry engagement, a brutal test of human endurance against a determined enemy and one of the world's harshest environments. The narrative of Attu, therefore implicitly debunks the idea that modern warfare is solely about technological superiority. It was a battle where grit, determination, and infantry tactics had to overcome the limitations of technology imposed by the environment itself. The initial American landings on Attu, while successful in establishing a foothold, were immediately plagued by an underestimation of Japanese defenses and severe environmental challenges. This led to a brutal, protracted, and costly attritional battle for key strategic locations like Massacre Valley and Holtz Bay. On May 11, 1943, as the Southern Force landed at Massacre Bay, the Northern Force commenced its assault at Red Beach. This location was chosen for its most unpromising and unlikely appearance, its half-submerged rocks and steep surrounding hills making it seem less defensible. Initially, the Northern Force, composed of the 1st Battalion of the 17th Infantry, a battery of field artillery, and supporting troops, met little resistance. However, the lack of initial opposition did not guarantee an easy advance. The battle for Hill X, for instance, quickly devolved into a brutal struggle, with American forces pinned down by mortar, machine gun, and rifle fire from entrenched enemy positions. The Japanese forces expertly utilized the terrain for concealment and defensive advantage, forcing American troops into costly frontal assaults. Lieutenant Otis E. Long, leading a left flank protection platoon, encountered initial resistance and an abandoned Japanese camp, providing a chilling preview of the fight ahead. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Charles K. Paulson's right flank protection platoon, though forced to retreat, recovered a crucial Japanese defense plan for Chichagof Harbor, a vital piece of intelligence. As the days ground on, the severe weather-dense fog, snow, bitter cold, and unrelenting rain created a constant, disorienting adversary. Constant fog obscured the Japanese mountain positions, forcing repeated postponements of attacks. The unfamiliar tundra underfoot and growing darkness made navigation treacherous. Invisible enemy snipers fell back into the fog, making every step perilous. For the Provisional Battalion, their arduous trek through the mountains involved steep snow-covered slopes, windswept mountaintops, and icy fog. Between May 11th and 16th, multiple American attempts to capture Jarmin Pass by frontal attack ended in costly failure. The initial failures to capture Jarmin Pass and Hill X forced a critical re-evaluation of tactics and led to urgent requests for reinforcements. This highlights that initial assumptions about the ease of taking Attu were incorrect, revealing a more formidable Japanese defense than perhaps anticipated. It was not until May 16th and 17th that the Japanese, responding to the Northern Forces' successes in securing Holtz Bay's high ground, made a tactical withdrawal from Jarmin Pass and Holtz Bay. This created a strategic vulnerability and a crucial junction for the American forces. On May 17th, the Southern force was increased from 3 to 5 battalions. The physical junction of the Northern and Southern forces on May 18th marked a crucial operational victory, paving the way for a coordinated push towards Chichagof. This coordination would prove vital, especially given the initial lack of intelligence sharing that had hampered early advances. The battle for Attu quickly proved a brutal, hard-fought campaign, characterized by tenacious Japanese defense and American reliance on overwhelming firepower and coordinated tactics to overcome challenging terrain and weather. It demonstrated the grim realities of island warfare. As the fight progressed towards Chichagof Harbor, the methodical American approach became evident. Commanders like General Landrum employed a high-ground-first tactic, understanding that control of the ridges was paramount to advancing into the valleys. On May 22nd at 0640 hours, the American assault on Sarana Nose began with an overwhelming display of concentrated firepower. 32 heavy machine guns, 8 light machine guns, 14 37mm guns, 23 81mm mortars, a section of 75mm pack howitzers, and 4 batteries of 105mm pack howitzers, every powerful infantry weapon available. This torrent of high explosives and lead pounded Japanese positions, creating a bridge across which you could walk. At 070, Company K stormed the slope, advancing through the devastation. This massive preparatory barrage demonstrated the crucial, often overlooked contribution of artillery in support. The battle for Prendergast Ridge saw its own challenges, including Company A's mistaken withholding of fire due to thick fog and the appearance of what seemed like friendly troops coming over the crest. Such incidents underscored the pervasive difficulty of distinguishing friend from foe in the dense Aleutian fog. By May 23rd, the 2nd Battalion of the 17th Infantry launched its attack on Fishhook Ridge, a position where the Japanese occupied a 200-yard trench system, deep dug in snow and in places so covered over as to be virtually invisible. This was no swift, decisive victory, but a hard-fought and protracted struggle. Even the simple act of landing artillery was a monumental task. Heavy 105mm rifles and the cats or tractors meant to pull them struggled through the spongy, yielding tundra, often wallowing helplessly in the black, oozing mud just 75 yards from the beach. It was a testament to the perseverance of men like Lieutenant James West, who led the artillery advance party, that these guns were eventually brought to bear. Lieutenant William Kimball, an artillery officer, recalled the electrifying command, "One on the way, then fire," as the big gun slammed back, delivering the first round of artillery toward the enemy. By May 25th, American forces had reached the base of the Fishhook in the battle for Chichakins. Company E of the 17th cleared a section of the snow trench, while on May 26th, the 2nd Battalion of the 17th and Company B of the 4th held positions on Fishhook. The campaign for Attu, despite its intense combat, harsh weather, and significant loss of life, secured a key strategic island in the Aleutian chain. It proved crucial for future American operations and ultimately forced the Japanese abandonment of Kiska, neutralizing their Aleutian presence. The high casualty rates and protracted nature of the fighting underscored the brutal reality of island-hopping campaigns. For decades, Japanese high command communiques exaggerated American casualties, claiming no less than 6,000 up to May 28th, and inflating American effectives to 20,000. However, newly examined records reveal the true American casualties were considerably less than 3,000, while US forces never exceeded 12,000. Only 29 Japanese prisoners were taken out of an initial 2,300 defenders. This battle highlighted the critical importance of logistical and equipment readiness for operations in extreme environments, and provided valuable lessons in amphibious assault and combat in Arctic-like conditions for future Pacific operations. Despite the overwhelming odds and brutal conditions, there was never a faltering of American courage, or a loss of faith in ultimate victory. The fight for Attu was more than a grand strategic maneuver. It was a series of brutal, disorienting, and often chaotic small unit engagements. The initial advance into Massacre Valley was plagued by severe weather, poor visibility, and the constant threat of an unseen enemy, forcing soldiers to rely on immense courage and resourcefulness. Lieutenant Charles K. Paulson, commander of the 1st Platoon, Company F, 17th Infantry, vividly recounted his unit's struggles to secure the right flank. From the moment their advance into the mountains began at 1600 hours on May 11th, his mission objectives to secure the flank, block the pass, and join the battalion were immediately hampered by dense fog, treacherous tundra, and an enemy already entrenched. The terrain was a constant, formidable adversary. Soldiers faced unfamiliar tundra underfoot, its holes and snow concealing unseen dangers. The wind whipped wet fog and ice particles, stinging like little knives. Such environmental challenges severely degraded visibility, navigation, and troop morale, contributing to widespread confusion and isolation. Japanese forces, masterfully utilizing the terrain, had established strong defensive positions in key strategic locations. They were in a big horseshoe all around us, informing Paulson's platoon that they were surrounded on 3 sides. These positions included rocky nests on mountainsides, heavy machine guns, mortars, and snipers, all expertly concealed. The persistent threat of invisible enemy snipers who fell back into the fog made every exposed moment a gamble with death. Compounding these challenges were critical communication failures. Malfunctioning radios, specifically the A284 and A195 models, prevented effective coordination and reporting. Units often operated independently, becoming isolated and exposed. Alaskan scouts became vital for relaying enemy coordinates, their local knowledge proving indispensable where technology failed. The chaotic nature of the fighting also led to devastating friendly fire incidents. One particularly harrowing example occurred when the 3rd Squad descended a snowfield. Mistaken for enemy troops due to the fog and the similar-sounding weapons fire, they endured an intense barrage from their own forces. The very ground they fought on was fraught with danger, filled with scraps of maps and documents, pieces of sake bottles and cigarettes, and the constant crack of bullets overhead. Sergeant Louis Adami was injured in the attack on Jarmin Pass, a testament to the brutal effectiveness of Japanese fire. The psychological warfare was also relentless. Sergeant Anthony S. Bumbiko's squad encountered a deceptive Japanese tactic, enemy soldiers calling out "mushy mushy," Japanese for hello, to lure American troops into revealing their positions. An American response of "higher" could be fatal. Bumbiko seized a Japanese saber as a tangible trophy, a stark reminder of the close-quarters combat. For 21 long, back-breaking, cold days and nights, Paulson's unit endured. Corporal Mike Brusuelas, a machine gunner, showed immense bravery, covering his squad's retreat against overwhelming odds. The guts of the soldiers, not just their rations, sustained them in these dire circumstances. This narrative implicitly debunks the idea that the army travels on its stomach as the primary driver of soldier effectiveness, instead highlighting sheer will. Wiremen like Walter Karlinaski, Isidore Eisenberg, and Bernard L. Hillers performed nerve-wracking missions, laying critical communication lines under relentless fire. Hillers even played a harmonica under intense bombardment, a poignant act of human resilience in the face of death. The battle for the strategic passes and high ground was a relentless attritional grind. Clevesy Pass was quickly identified as a damned hard nut, its approaches raked by intense machine gun fire and mortar barrages. American forces attempting to bulldoze their way into the pass met with fierce and sustained resistance. Colonel Zimmerman, assessing the situation in Jarmin Pass, initially believed it was clear. This proved to be a dangerously incorrect assumption, underscoring the unreliability of information in the fog of war. It actively debunks any notion of straightforward advances. Jarman Pass, after 4 days of fierce fighting, was finally opened on the night of May 18th. This was a critical turning point, a necessary precursor to further assaults. On the same night, Lieutenant William E. Brown's platoon launched an attack on Cold Mountain despite his radio malfunctioning. The fog, omnipresent and capricious, played a dual role. It allowed medical evacuation teams like Staff Sergeant Ernest Briggs' unit to reach wounded under its concealing shroud. Yet it also presented a constant danger. A sudden lift could expose troops to immediate enemy fire. The deathly silence of Jarman Pass was an ominous calm, a prelude to potential hidden dangers. The tactical details of the fighting were a testament to the brutal ingenuity required. Grenades rolled down slopes often exploded out of range, thwarted by the uneven terrain. Corporal Raymond C. Gantner demonstrated immense bravery, attacking a Japanese machine gun nest with his M1 rifle, while Private First Class Ira Clausen engaged in close quarters struggle in a Japanese dugout. The barman, Private Paul C. Goat Smith, stopped a bayonet charge, highlighting the critical role of automatic fire in repelling desperate enemy assaults. The medical corps faced immense logistical challenges. The walking wounded men capable of moving under their own power provided significant aid to the evacuation effort, assisting with litters through the treacherous tundra and soggy ground. The evacuation from a ravine begun on the evening of May 14th was completed by 1830 hours, with medical personnel finally reaching headquarters by 0500 on May 15th. The strategic importance of these passes was undeniable. Their control was crucial for further advances and, vitally, for connecting the disparate American forces. At 2200 on May 19th, the first contact with the Northern force was made in Holt's Bay, and by 0230 on May 20th, the Southern force had fully linked up, a momentous step towards integrating operational planning that had been so challenging in the initial days. The sustained and brutal fighting on key terrain features like Cold Mountain, Cleavesy Pass, and Point Able was characterized by determined Japanese defenses, fierce American assaults, and significant American casualties. The eventual capture of these strategic objectives came at a high cost and often through considerable improvisation. Lieutenant Samuel W. Way, Cleavesy Jr. Death during an assault on Cold Mountain was so significant that Cleavesy Pass was named in his honor, a stark symbol of the immense human cost of securing this objective. Japanese forces consistently utilized high ground, natural fortifications like ridges and conical mountains, and heavily fortified trench systems, often supported by machine guns and 37mm cannons. These emplacements were designed to create devastating crossfires dominating American approaches. American assault tactics, often direct and uphill across open terrain, led to heavy casualties against these prepared defenses. The extremely difficult and exposed terrain, steep slopes, narrow ridges, heavy fog, and brutal winter conditions significantly amplified the challenge of these attacks. On May 19th, Corporal Tony L. Pinelli, with incredible bravery, captured a Japanese trench position on Engineer Hill in Cleavesy Pass. His daring grenade attack on a concealed mortar position broke a critical point in the Japanese line. The American forces, despite initial failures to take the Jap guns directly, regrouped. Coordinated mortar fire, precisely directed onto specific trench positions, proved a critical tactical breakthrough. Point Able, described as a conical mountain crowned with a huge bare rock, a fortress, proved a particularly formidable objective. Initial direct uphill assaults on May 16th failed due to exposed positions. This forced a tactical re-evaluation. A second, more successful approach was launched on the night of May 18th, using the narrow, sheer Gilbert Ridge. This coordinated attack from multiple directions, with heavy mortar support, ultimately broke the Japanese hold, leading to Point Able's capture by 03:06 successful. Lieutenant Donald E. Damadel E. Duanel's recollection of these assaults reveals the brutal nature of sustained combat, the extreme cold, the psychological impact of close-quarters fighting, and the relentless losses. Similarly, Sergeant Frank J. Gonzalez's experience highlights the critical element of surprise. His successful infiltration by the Provisional Battalion behind Japanese lines in the Holtz Bay sector, which forced an estimated 17,700 Japanese troops from their main supply base, created a critical disruption. His account also vividly describes the dangerous effectiveness of Japanese camouflage dugouts. Despite the cost, the capture of these positions, Cold Mountain, Clevesy Pass, Point Able, and the Holtz Bay sector represented the overcoming of significant Japanese strongholds. These gains were crucial for securing the broader operational area. The accounts demonstrate the tenacity of American soldiers, their ability to adapt tactics using terrain, calling for specific fire support, improvising with communication via wire and sound-powered phones, and their enduring will to fight despite overwhelming odds and losses. This narrative challenges any notion of easy victories. It emphasizes the sheer difficulty, the relentless nature of Japanese resistance, and the often messy, piecemeal nature of battlefield success, far from pristine military operations. The raw, visceral accounts from Attu paint a brutal picture of intense close-quarters combat, highlighting the resilience and adaptability of American soldiers in the face of overwhelming odds. This was not a war of grand strategy alone, but one decided by small unit initiative and individual bravery. Japanese tactics were often characterized by surprise, overwhelming assaults utilizing bayonets and grenades. Soldiers developed grimly effective counter-tactics. The sizzled grenade became a crucial adaptation. Holding grenades longer before throwing them proved more effective against charging Japanese forces. Corporal Jerome G. J.J.'s forces. Corporal Jerome G. Job, a master of improvisation, even repurposed captured Japanese knee mortars. He discovered their fuses had a left-hand thread, requiring a half-turn right for detonation, and successfully employed enemy weapons against their original owners. The terrain itself, hills, gorges, tundra, and constant fog, combined with darkness, severely hampered American movement and communication. This created ample opportunities for Japanese ambushes. Frank J. DeMeo, raising an early alarm, demonstrated prescience of the dangers lurking. Henry G. McDonnell engaged in desperate hand-to-hand combat, a common occurrence in the unforgiving Attu landscape. Lieutenant Colonel Albert V. Hartle, Little Caesar to his men, intervened decisively to direct relief where units were hard-pressed. Communication failures were rampant. Lieutenant Paul M. Cotty, a patrol leader, became separated and was nearly fatally misidentified due to the chaos, highlighting the profound challenges of command and control. Captain William R. Davis, though wounded by a grenade, showed remarkable courage and initiative by aggressively moving to take high ground despite the uncertainty of enemy presence. Private First Class Melvin J. Nelson, a machine gunner, displayed extreme determination, retaliating against a sniper who had killed his comrade. One particularly intense incident, 5 days after the fight on Hill X, involved Sergeant Richard H. Mason in a duplex foxhole encounter. His unit's successful defense against Japanese forces in close proximity illustrated the effectiveness of determined resistance, even in confused situations. The battle was continuous, with reports of 40 to 50 dead Japs in one engagement, and 45 Japanese bodies counted after a bayonet assault. On May 14th, during an advance over Hill X, 8 Americans were killed, and a dozen wounded, underscoring the grim attrition rate. Beyond the physical combat, the psychological toll was immense. The texts reveal a spectrum of human experience: fear, determination, fury, and even dark humor. This profoundly debunks the myth that soldiers are emotionless automatons in combat. Instead, Attu demonstrated that success hinged on the actions of individual soldiers and small units, their quick thinking, and their ability to adapt to chaotic situations on the ground. This was a raw, unvarnished look at the savage nature of a Pacific campaign, where close-quarters combat, constant threat, and immense psychological strain were the daily reality. The brutal, chaotic, and often disorienting reality of combat on Attu was exacerbated by challenges that often overshadowed the direct enemy threat. The pervasive, debilitating effects of the environment, and the difficulty of identifying friend from foe, left a profound psychological toll. The bitter cold and fog of Attu proved a harder enemy to fight than the Japs for many. Its pervasive impact directly contributed to severe exposure, exhaustion, and lowered morale. Platoon Runner Roy L. Kitts, an 18-year-old volunteer, is remembered for bringing good hot coffee from a canteen cup, even amidst intense fire, boiled with Jap canned heat. These small acts of comfort were moments of grace in a dehumanizing war. However, for 90% of the scout company and 3/4 of the 7th Reconnaissance Troop, the battle meant suffering from severe exposure, a stark testament to the environment's lethal impact. The persistent fog made identification a constant hazard. Lieutenant Joseph A. Gray, meticulously cleaning his Tommy gun, expressed frustration at the Red Ball Express, a single Japanese airplane attack, occurring while his weapon was disassembled. It was a missed opportunity for combat, but also a symbol of the pervasive tension. The memory of Japs mistaken for American scouts, only to be identified by their larger, entrenching shovel with a non-cross handle, highlights the split-second decisions and potential for fratricidal fire. One soldier recounted a gassed-up enemy, practically drunk, with rifle and bayonet, who spoke good English before being engaged. Such incidents underscored the confusion and the desperate nature of the enemy. Logistical failures further hampered American advances. Supply planes often could not penetrate the dense fog, leading to critical ammunition shortages. Okel, with 3 shots from his carbine, silenced a Japanese light machine gun, then engaged another crew in a Fallout 1 drill, a testament to individual initiative when supplies were scarce. Sergeant Francis W. of Behived, McLean recalled the chilling Japanese taunt, "Damn American dogs, we massacre you," a reminder of the enemy's fanatical resolve. Scott the runner, found dead on a stone parapet near a Japanese machine gun emplacement. His Tommy gun jammed became a tragic symbol of the battle's attrition. The sheer scale of supporting firepower, however, could be overwhelming. At Sarana Nose, American forces unleashed tons of fury from 32 heavy machine guns, 14 37mm guns, 23 81mm artillery. Some gunners pushed 4,000 rounds through their guns in 20 minutes. This created a beautiful show of offensive power. Yet, this was immediately juxtaposed with the desperate fight for survival in the canyon. The lingering memories of minor details, a shovel, coffee, Lieutenant Stott's 2 old pieces of candy, often eclipsed the grander narratives, underscoring the profound psychological imprint of combat. The text implicitly challenges any notion of a straightforward, decisive victory achieved solely through superior firepower. It emphasizes the grind, the psychological wear and tear, and the brutalizing effect of combat on the soldiers involved. The final push for the fishhook was a brutal, attritional struggle, characterized by fierce small unit engagements and costly advances. The key objective was the Bahai and the strategic pass beyond it. The Suicide Basin, a large flat area scattered with boulders and huge rocks at the foot of the Bahai, lived up to its name. May 24th was the toughest day of the entire campaign. Company K fell back under heavy fire, and Lieutenant Paul Evans was severely wounded by machine gun fire and shrapnel. A sniper, positioned 300 yards away with a telescope sight, posed a significant and deadly threat. Japanese forces had established formidable defenses, particularly an emplacement under a huge rock set near the base of a ridge, as big as a large mess hall, with dug-in trenches and tunnels. This position proved impervious to conventional artillery and mortar fire. It took Sergeant Niels Jensen and 10 men, on May 25th, to eliminate this entrenched position using grenades and close-quarters combat, a critical breakthrough that demonstrated the effectiveness of targeted aggressive small unit tactics. Later that day, however, a mortar accident involving an 81mm mortar resulted in the death of Sergeant Fred Rivas and injury to Platoon Sergeant Frank J. Chioso, due to a shell hanging in the tube. Such incidents highlighted the inherent dangers and complexities of battlefield coordination. The assaults on the Bahai and the pass continued relentlessly. On May 26th, Sergeant George W. Myrick, witnessing his buddy Private Charles G. Keyes' shot, launched a solo charge into a Japanese trench, demonstrating extreme battlefield initiative. Sergeant James R. Carney, after surviving a near-fatal sniper shot to his helmet, engaged in aggressive close-quarters combat, bayoneting and shooting the enemy. A Dud 60mm mortar, an own weapon, tragically exploded and injured American soldiers. A critical sniper was eventually eliminated by the Bayard man, Reuben E. Anderson. In one harrowing encounter, 2 Japanese soldiers, disguised as friends, were discovered near a snow trench before being neutralized with grenades. Private First Class Joe P. Turridades, Martinez distinguished himself with an extraordinary combat performance, becoming a tornado with a Bayar and then an M1 rifle before being critically wounded. The final fight at the crest of the pass involved intense grenade exchanges and a near disaster with a box of Japanese TNT. The terrain itself was a horror to cross, a narrow, steep and rugged ridge resembling razor-edged mountains, allowing only single-file walking. The bitter cold and numbing conditions affected troop morale and effectiveness, with soldiers shivering uncontrollably on the ridge. The immense physical strain of carrying ammunition, such as 32 heavy shells of 54 pounds apiece, for the 105 mm artillery, uphill through deep mud, added to the ordeal. Even moments of supposed rest were fraught with peril. The 2nd Battalion experienced friendly bombing by US bombers, forcing soldiers to be dug out of mud and tundra. These events revealed the high cost of overcoming deeply entrenched enemy positions in such difficult terrain. The text debunks the idea that overwhelming artillery and air power alone could easily overcome well-prepared defenses. It demonstrates that even in the face of massive firepower, individual initiative and brave small unit actions were crucial for achieving objectives. The narrative ultimately dispels any simplistic notion of clear-cut victories, highlighting instead the messy, often desperate nature of close-quarters combat. As the battle for Attu reached its grim conclusion, the Japanese commander, Colonel Yasuyo Yamasaki, issued a desperate field order on May 29, 1943, a final, suicidal counterattack. The fight would devolve into sheer, unadulterated chaos, a brutal, disorienting surprise breakthrough that forced non-combat personnel, engineers, cooks, into desperate defensive actions. The enemy breakthrough occurred swiftly, catching American personnel off guard due to prior exhaustion and a degree of complacency. Under the cover of darkness, fog, and intense noise, a sudden, overwhelming Japanese infiltration shattered the illusion of a secure rear. The Japanese employed surprise bayonet charges, machine guns, and grenades to overwhelm defensive positions, often targeting supply dumps and rear areas. The entire valley was transformed into a nightmare of flashes and noise and scampering shadows and death. On Vanderlaan Peak, on the night of May 28, an American machine gun froze due to faulty pressstone in its water jacket, crippling a vital defense as 16 Japanese attackers launched their initial assault. Sergeant Jonathan H. Aki and H. Aki, Acceptor, Albright and Early Gawley struggled to keep their light machine guns firing, their efforts critical against the advancing enemy. About 19 dead Japanese were counted in one engagement on Vanderlaan Peak. This breakthrough forced individuals whose primary roles were not combat into extraordinary acts of heroism. Captain Albert L. Pence, Jr. found himself leading a chaotic advance, engaging in close-quarters combat, and making desperate efforts to aid a mortally wounded soldier. Sergeant Harold J. Hunter's suspicion and decisive action against an infiltrator, followed by his bravery in bayoneting an unseen enemy, illustrates the blurred lines of combat and non-combat. Corporal Rudolph P. as Personal Rudolph Tombat, Corporal Rudolph Bodine and Alvin C. Roth became examples of severely wounded soldiers enduring horrific conditions, their resilience a testament to the human spirit. Perhaps nowhere was the sheer fragility of survival more evident than at Captain George S. Bowler's aid station. Located deep behind what was thought to be the front lines, it was ill-equipped for a sudden enemy infiltration. The evening of May 28 had been routine, but after 040, the first bullet ripped through the double tent. A CQ, the duty officer, had first raised the alarm of enemy proximity, but Captain Bryce's attempt to use the phone proved futile. It was dead. The close proximity of an estimated 100 or so Japanese in the immediate vicinity of the aid station meant rapid escalation from distant firing to direct assault. A bullet hit him, and he dropped with a gasp as an aid man moved towards the door. The stovepipe was hit with a crash. Then the stove clanged as a bullet tore through it. Captain Buller, facing imminent annihilation with 13 men, many of them severely wounded patients unable to move, issued a desperate, life-saving order. Play dead, lie still, and play dead. This was a tactic born of desperation, but enforced by necessity. Captain Bryce strategically placed a severely wounded soldier's body at the tent entrance, a grim deterrent to further enemy investigation. For nearly 2 days, the men played dead, enduring a profound psychological ordeal. What a nightmare, a madness of noise and confusion and deadliness, one survivor recalled. The silence inside the tent and the straining for silence set everyone's nerves on edge. Miracles were too flimsy to count on, and luck had already been pushed to a ridiculous extreme. The ultimate irony, and the final turning point, came at the moment of rescue. After 2 p.m. on the second day, American rescue forces approached. A shout, "Hey George, look here a minute," confirmed their presence. But then, a chilling threat. The rescuers, mistaking the silent tent and its occupants for the enemy, threatened to toss a grenade inside. For a terrible instant, no one spoke. Captain Buela, making a critical split-second decision, cried out, "American wounded." This act of disciplined restraint and quick identification averted a near-tragic elimination by their own forces. The lives of 12 men had hung on a thread as fine as the split-second timing of a purely chance remark. Ultimately, 12 men survived the ordeal, with only one fatality during the initial assault. Their survival against overwhelming odds was a testament to desperate improvisation and calculated risk-taking. It was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. One soldier remembered of the M1 rifles of the rescue party, the extreme psychological impact of prolonged fear, and the near-constant threat of annihilation left indelible scars. Captain George S.S. ported. Burla himself endured a day and a half hiding in his clearing station amidst the slaughter, a testament to the chaos and brutality of the breakthrough. The Battle of Attu, which officially ended on May 30, 1943, with Chichagof Harbour occupied, was a visceral, hard-won victory. It revealed the brutal, unromanticized realities of island warfare and the profound impact of unrelenting environmental challenges. More than a strategic success, it was a testament to the sheer resilience of the human spirit, the grim determination of the American infantry, and the extraordinary courage of individuals thrust into unimagination of the American infantry, Attu secured a vital stepping stone in the Aleutian chain, forced the Japanese to abandon Kiska, and provided invaluable, though costly lessons for the campaigns yet to come in the Pacific. But Attu's grim reality began to unfold, etching those lessons into the very souls of its soldiers. As the dark, foggy night of May 28 bled into the early morning of May 29, around 0500, bedlam was numbing. A horde of screaming, chattering Japs descended on the unprepared American positions. The attack began with a flurry of grenades, followed by shouts of banzai. "We die, you die." The air filled with machine gun bullets, the gleam of bayonets, and automatic rifle fire. Japanese soldiers wielded rifles, grenades, machine guns, and even bayonets tied on sticks. Close-quarters combat erupted with terrifying suddenness, particularly targeting the rear clearing station near Cleavesy Pass. Guard Johnson fired his .45 pistol until he fell, receiving multiple bayonet wounds in the frantic melee. Sexton, dazed and desperate, fired his carbine through the canvas of his tent. Lieutenant Green made immediate, harsh decisions, shooting a man who did not get down fast enough in the swirling confusion. Another guard, a young Mexican boy, was tragically bayoneted in the attack. Sexton would later learn his friends, Johnson and Orlo, had been killed. A sentry crawled in, miraculously alive, with 13 wounds from both shots and bayonets. Corporal Cletus A. Brown was shot and killed amidst the carnage around the camp. Even a patient was bayoneted through the buttocks, then shot in the arm. Tech 5 Warren A. Lewis was shot while attempting a rescue. Private Norman F. Elliott was shot in the back, adding to the grim toll. Sergeant Williams was hit, and Bruce C.C. Heagney wounded while treating a patient. Lieutenant Friedberg was hit in the head by a grenade fragment as Captain Yellin administered morphine in a desperate attempt to staunch the suffering. Chaplain Turner moved among the wounded, offering solace in the chaos. On the flanks, Browning automatic rifles' bars roared to life. Their tracer ammunition cut through the fog and darkness, marking friendly lines and identifying targets for desperate American defenders. Lieutenant Dillon, a grim silhouette, engaged in long-range sniping with his .30. The enemy, described in numbers of 40 and 50, seemed to be everywhere. They were found eating from Company D's kitchen, a brazen act of infiltration. The disciplined yet arrogant demeanor of a Japanese officer, carrying himself like a Prussian, straight and arrogant, chilled those who saw him. Later, American grenades rained down on enemy concentrations, particularly effective against Japs dug 3 deep in the ditch. A more unconventional tactic emerged on Engineer Hill and Sarana Valley. TNT and powder men were deployed to collapse snowbanks hiding enemy positions. This grim innovation turned live Japs into good ones and packed them on ice. The phrase, "little flower," had been a password, but after witnessing the brutal realities of Attu, it induced shivers, a chilling reminder of the night's horrors. The overwhelming feeling was one of being dazed, the sheer magnitude of destruction, almost incomprehensible. This initial shock gave way to organization, a turning point in the relentless fight. American forces began to coordinate fires, including heavy machine gun fire across Jim Fish Valley. Sergeant John J. Sullivan, a heavy machine gunner, observed flanking maneuvers. Lieutenant Stephen McIntyre directed the devastating fire, eager to see the results. The environmental challenges were immense: constant fog, bone-chilling cold, and the obscuring darkness. Terrain like Chichikov Valley, Cold Mountain, and Brewer Ridge, along with countless Jap holes, slit trenches, and dugouts, provided perfect concealment for a tenacious enemy. But Tudis provided perfect conceal Purin's partia prey, and did true plusser. Prusser. The maddening jumble of flashes and explosions amidst the fog left men powerless to help, waiting for identification of the target. Private First Class Antonio Aguilar, a scout, exemplified thinking courage, engaging and killing a Japanese officer in hand-to-hand combat. He was assisted by Private Antonio J.J.T. Maquinales and Private Frank N. Ochoa, with Sergeant Archie L. Bundy also present. Sergeant Arthur H.H. Sergeant Arthur H.H. defeated by Dentor Cumser's being. Thomas was killed by a shot through the mouth, a stark indicator of the fighting's intimacy. Albert Bianchi was wounded twice, tumbling off a cliff in the chaos. Louis Straczynski and Corporal Frank R. Burns were wounded by relentless machine gun fire. Major Lee Wallace, though suffering from leg wounds, used his carbine as a cane, leading by sheer will. Staff Sergeant Harold J. Hunter fell to a bullet to the forehead. The fight for Sarana Nose on May 29 saw 59 Japanese killed in one hole, at the cost of 5 American boys. Later, on the morning of May 30th, the rear guard sounded the alarm as Japanese remnants approached up a draw. Captain Albert L. Pence, Jr. led a patrol, surviving multiple grenade attacks and bullet hits to his belt buckle and helmet, personally killing a sniper wearing an American helmet. Sergeant Robert Gonzalez flanked Japanese soldiers, relentlessly pushing the attack. Andrew Mezai was wounded in the hip by machine gun fire, a constant threat. The next phase, the mopping-up operations, was equally grim. Sergeant Horace A. Lopez recounted the systematic clearing of pockets of resistance. Corporal William E. Smith, a veteran of both World Wars, became a grim legend, his M1 rifle kept immaculate, marked with 35 kill notches, one for each Jap taken. He made his first sniper kill on Cold Mountain around May 20th, from 600 yards. His instinct for approaching Japanese proved prescient the night after Sarano Nose. He later spotted 150, 200 Japanese moving out of a draw, almost at morning. The discovery of paper bullets in a sniper's rifle by Corporal George H. Starr, whose buddy John W.A. Moore killed that very sniper, was unsettling. This challenged the accepted norms of combat, adding another layer of existential dread. The systematic clearing of Jap holes and caves often ended in Japanese soldiers blowing themselves up with grenades. Lieutenant Luther G. Brewer Jr. was killed during a firefight on Brewer Ridge. Major John D. O'Reilly participated in the Sarana Nose fight, throwing grenades with desperate fury. Even after the major engagements, danger lingered, whipped by a shadow. The aftermath was like house cleaning with a gigantic hangover, full of unseen threats. Sergeant Blufford J. Head lost a hand to a dud Japanese hand grenade during cleanup. Private First Class Hubert H. Summers was severely lacerated by an exploding shell in a rubbish fire, his body looking like a red sponge. The fear of being discovered by the enemy while hiding was profound. The overwhelming relief of hearing American voices cut through the dread. On June 8th, at 2200, a ghost-like Japanese soldier, outlined against the skyline in the fog, was sighted. Gillespie directed the pursuit, aiming to capture prisoners. Private First Class Ira E. Patrick discovered a Japanese blanket stretched across a crevice, nearly killed by the hidden Japanese rifle and light machine gun inside. Private Emerson L. Burgett captured 2 Japanese prisoners, one wearing a heavy fur-lined blue navy overcoat over his tan uniform. His pockets yielded assorted junk, Jap paper money, and diverse pornography on silk handkerchiefs, along with a Jap talk to prisoners, and their surprise highlighted a stark cultural divide. Corporal Roscoe C. Campbell questioned an English-speaking prisoner. Sergeant Kenneth Nicolay arrived with reinforcements, securing the captured Japanese. The mopping up phase, though successful, meant heavy casualties and widespread destruction. Foxholes were filled with rags, scraps of hastily eaten rations, a shoe, a broken rifle, a body or a piece of one. The cost of victory was undeniable, etched in the weary faces of the survivors. The profound psychological impact of this brutal combat lingered, evident in the soft-voiced embarrassment of young soldiers who had endured too much perennial. This was not a tale of swashbuckling invincibility, but of thinking courage and grim determination. Finally, on July 4th, amidst the vast tundra, a solemn memorial ceremony was held. Major Charles G. Fredericks read the roll call of the fallen. Lieutenant Colonel Glenn A. Nelson spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of sacrifice. Padre Habetz repeated a prayer, his words echoing over the mountains. Taps echoed over the mountains, a poignant lament for those lost. Soldiers stood with chins clamped hard and wet eyes blinking, Captain Robert C. Falston commanding their final march off the field. Attu was secured, but its legacy was one of the brutal, visceral reality of combat and the unwavering resilience required to overcome an existential threat.